Yeah, I think it's going to be magnificent. There are a lot of other programs. There's another program that we'll be broadcasting as well, and I mentioned it last week. It's The Cell, which had Brett Stevens as the moderator, and Paul Begala, who is a Democratic um, expert who worked with the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, et cetera. And Karl Rove, of course, is with the Reagan and Bush administrations, talking about everything from political terrorism, domestic terrorism, to the dysfunction of our political situation. And they were very candid, very forthright, just a brilliant talk. And it was, I don't know, it was last Sunday or something like that, or a weekend ago. And so they were able to offer that to us just to Temple Sinai, because I nudged, which is another lesson. Never be shy to be a nudge, right? So we're going to be offering it. Anyone can tune in at their discretion from this Sunday at noon until next Tuesday at midnight or something like that. So I want to try to promote that out, and we'll get some people to, maybe we can follow up with a dialogue with a lot of wonderful programs that we have going on. And we've got to give lots of shout outs to Yoni. So thank you, buddy. Barbara, good to see you. Alan, good to see you guys too. Let's go ahead and say a blessing. Very interesting Torah portions, plural, this week. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe. You've sanctified us with mitzvot and commanded us to engage with words of Torah. Now we have Torah Vayakhel, and we have Pikudei as well. These are the last two parashiot of the book of Exodus. So it's a double portion. And I always, when I say double portion, I keep thinking of a Certs commercial, which Yoni, you wouldn't get necessarily, but the rest of you would. They're two mints in one.
2 mints in one.
One with Retson, right? Anyway, so this is two Torah portions in one, but we even have a third, right? So we have Vayakhel and Pikudei, but also we have a special reading because it's Shabbat HaChodesh. Shabbat HaChodesh is the fourth of the special parshiot from the first of Adar until the beginning of Nisan. And Shabbat HaChodesh is another recitation of the 12th chapter, or the beginning of the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. And we'll be looking at that as well, because we are getting to be that close time before Passover. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Saturday night this week. And so this special Shabbat HaChodesh is another one of those wake-up calls, like, oh my goodness, right? We got to start getting things together. Again, we're going to be virtual this year, so it's a little bit different. Nevertheless, it's the time not to go and buy those huge packets of pasta and chametz at Costco. This is the time to say, you know what, maybe I should eat what I've got, and I can replenish afterwards. But anyway, it's a very special time. And what I wanted to link up is the interesting confluence of the end of the book of Exodus with speaking of, it's the bringing together of all of the elements for the tabernacle, and then the special reading that we have for chapter 12. Both of them speak of the Rosh HaChodeshim Lechem, of the first of the months for you. And so I have some, wanted to look at that a little bit, and maybe that'll give us some insight as to the significance of this special Sabbath, Shabbat HaChodesh. Again, it's one of those that you go, maybe I've heard of Shabbat Zachor before Purim, and Shabbat HaShakel, Shkalim. So for sure, but Shabbat HaChodesh, I want to make sure it gets its due, because in rabbinic lore, it deserves it. Any questions? We're about to plow in. Oh, Michael's already got his Seder plate out. Where's your crane?
It's let's see, not mine, but I think it's to my right. Is that? No, that's Herosis.
Yeah.
My crane, no.
Yeah.
But
yours is the best. Yours is the best.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Anyway, yes, Arnie, go ahead.
Before we leave the Seder plate, I was reading this morning about this idea of putting an orange on the plate.
That's a wonderful. Before I steal in, who has a nice explanation? Anybody want to explain? Go ahead, Marcia.
they live in Florida.
No, it's a very important gesture. Go ahead, Marcia.
My understanding is a feminist edition, and it's see if I can remember how, because Susanna Heschel told me at our synagogue that you open the orange and spit out the bitterness of the seeds.
Oh.
And no,
There's a better. Here's what happened.
better one. Okay.
Look, this is the historical origin of it. It was a reaction to a JTS professor who, when someone was saying that we should have Miriam's cup and feminist additions to the Passover Seder, he scoffed and he said Miriam's cup and all of these newfangled additions are as authentic on a Seder plate as an orange.
Oh. Okay. Well, she maybe took it a little further.
Wow. No, I was actually, Margie, what I was reading is what you're kind of hinting to. The sweetness of Judaism in its totality, seeds are spitting out homophobia. And it was really a gesture, not so much for feminism, as for LGBT.
There's supposed to be something also about solidarity with the LGBT community.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I read this morning.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
last year at our Seder, which was virtual, my daughter-in-law's cousin is a rabbi in Boston, and she led it, and she asked us all from across the country to bring something different to our Seder plates, because what is different about tonight, and it was very different to be our first virtual Pesach. And I brought a dragon fruit to our Seder plate. It was supposed to be something that was both beautiful and ugly. So it was fun.
Good for you. I like that tradition. I think one of the things about, again, is certainly apropos to Shabbat HaChodesh, that we need to remember the importance of lahagid, to tell the story. And the telling the story is not necessarily just reading the story. Of course, we read the Haggadah. That goes without saying. But we've got to tell the story too. And there's an important, I think, essential aspect to the Passover experience where you just got to close the book and people tell your story. And every family has a story of redemption, which, by the way, that's that Rosh HaChodeshim Lechem. It's about a time of redemption. And we had the redemption of our ancestors, but I mean, every single person has a story in which they've overcome something that is really was a test of their strength, of their patience, of their will, and they overcame it, sometimes with help and sometimes just on their own. And to share these stories of redemption, we need to hear them. I think they're stories that give us inspiration and help us through our own times in which we think, "Oy, how much can I take?" And you learn about the incredible fortitude and willpower of those who overcame incredible obstacles. And one of the books that we give, and some of you are aware of it, one of the books that we give to the B'nai Mitzvah it's a book called The Triumphant Spirit. Have you heard me talk about that at all? Oh, I'll have to bring that on soon. The Triumphant Spirit is a book in which each chapter is of a Holocaust survivor. And so it has a picture on one side of the page, and the other page a description of their story. And each and every one of them, through incredible odds, decided to react to the Holocaust experience, not with bitterness, not with cynicism, not with anger, but rather by building and teaching and growing and nurturing a better world. And it's an incredible story that you read from each chapter of the Acts. So I'll bring the copy of that book so we can have a chance to share it, especially right after Passover. We have Yom HaShoah, so I'll bring it in context with that. So anyway, I like the idea, and I think that's what this is as well. Shabbat HaChodesh is, we are right on the cusp of another couple of weeks. What is it? Saturday night, the 28th of March. So before we have Passover, and what are we going to bring different? Manashtana halayla hazeh, as Linda said. What's a little bit different? So bring something different, but I hope you also bring some of your stories to share. At our Temple Sinai virtual Seder, which Susan and I will host, and of course Rabbi Jordy and Dan and others will be on as well. We'll have times in which we'll break out into little sessions so that people will be able to share a little bit and make it as personal as possible. And I'm sure after all of this experience, many of you are just going to do your own virtual Seder, which is lovely too. So wherever, I can't wait until next year. If we're not in Jerusalem, which would be, as you know, my first choice, if we're not in Jerusalem, that hopefully we'll have a second Seder all together and be able to be in the same room together. So let's get to our text. Unless anyone has, I've got like 10 chats there, so I'm not going to read those. So.
Rabbi, wasn't there something about the orange on the Seder plate that someone said there'll be an orange on, if a woman becomes a rabbi, there'll be an orange on the Seder plate?
Yeah, that's the story that I told. But Susanna Heschel, who's, and other people have taken variants of it and run with their own little story, and that's okay. Like every Haggadah, it grows. It grows into its own little, it has a life of its own. So that's cool, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the very, I want to focus on the last chapter of the book of Exodus, in which it does speak of HaChodesh HaRishon. About Adonai El Moshe Lemor, Bayom HaChodesh HaRishon, Be'echad LaChodesh, Takim et Mishkan Ochel Moed. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. And that beginning of the last chapter of the book of Exodus reflects the first sentence of the 12th chapter. Now, the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus, you might think, well, 12, well, what's 12? It could be, it can't be that significant. It wasn't the beginning of Genesis. It's not the beginning of Exodus. It's not the end of Exodus. It's right in the middle, right? But actually, chapter 12 has great significance, not only in our context, but Rashi made comment in reference to chapter 12, and the very first comment that he had to the beginning of the Torah. So who would like to read, first of all, this little section of chapter 12, which is a part of the special reading on Shabbat HaChodesh, and then we're going to read what Rashi had to say. So, Alan, I've made this about as large as I can, buddy.
It's good.
Go ahead and read it. Yeah, but
muted, Alan.
You're muted, Alan. There you go.
Okay, I'm ready. It's fine. The size is fine. And it says, Adonai said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to the whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household.
Okay, so two things. One is the this specification that this will be lachem, for you, right? Differentiating it for everyone else, but this will be for you, Rosh Chodashim, the beginning of the months. And we're going to learn from Ramban Nachmanides, as he expresses it quite brilliantly. And of course, he refers to the passages in the Talmud that he leans on, that in the beginning, the months did not have names. They simply had numbers. This is the first, that's the second, that's the third, etc. And in Judaism, we count the days of the week the same way. We have for Sunday, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Yom Revi'i, etc. The only day that has a name, even though it is referred to as Yom Shvi'i, the seventh day, is the Sabbath, Shabbat, right? But everything else is a number. So Rashi makes reference. This is a comment that he's making on the very first word in the Torah, Bereshit, as the Torah begins, Bereshit bara Elohim, and as God was creating all of the universe. And Rashi makes the following comment, and makes reference to a Talmudic passage, but he amplifies it. Go ahead, Alan.
Rabbi Isaac said the Torah, which is the law book of Israel, should have commenced with the verse, "This month shall be unto you the first of the months," which is the first commandment given to Israel. What is the reason then that it commences with the account of the creation? Because of the thought expressed in the text in Psalms, he declared to his people the strength of his works. That is, he gave an account of the work of creation in order that he might give them the heritage of the nations.
Right. So Rashi makes a very interesting statement. That is that by all accounts, this is our Torah, right? This is the Torah of the Jewish people. Why doesn't it begin with an account of our family, and especially of our experience? Because the first time we really have a specific Jewish commandment, mitzvah, specifically to our people, is in chapter 12, verse 2. This is the first of the months for you, right? This is the month that you shall start counting by. Now that's the first great instruction for us. And Rashi said, since it's our Torah, it should have started there. Why did he go on to these other experiences and Genesis and everything else? And so he points out that this line is really the start of something very special for us and our specific Jewish experience. The creation of the whole universe, Rashi and like the other ancestors said, that is a part of that connects with every living creature on this world. But as we're thinking about our family and our the redemption that we had from slavery and our ongoing family adventure and journey, it starts with this chapter 12. Start counting from this day forward. Anybody? Stunned into silence. All right. All right. So here's Nachmanides. Again, 13th century French exegete, is just a tremendous scholar. Again, not to confuse him with Rambam or Maimonides, who was a century earlier in Spanish. So let's see who would like to read from Nachmanides?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Jerry.
This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, is the first commandment which the Holy One, blessed be he, commanded Israel through Moses. And therefore, the previous verse says, in the land of Egypt, for the remaining commandments of the Torah were given at Mount Sinai. Or it means to say that the land of Egypt, and not in a city of Egypt, as our sages said,
Mechilta, it's a midrash collection.
Outside of a town.
According to its drash.
According to its drash, unto you means that sanctification of the month requires a court of expert judges, Rosh Hashanah 25b, and therefore it was not written earlier. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, for sanctification of the month applies only to Moses and Aaron and experts of their kind. And the reason for this month shall be unto you the beginning of months, is that Israel will count the first month, and from there will count all the months as second and third until the completion of the year with the 12th month, so that this will be a reminder of a great miracle. For any time that months will be mentioned, the miracle will be remembered. And therefore the months have no name in the Torah, but rather it says in the third month, Exodus 19:1, and in the second year, in the second month, that the cloud was taken up, Numbers 10:11. And in the seventh month, on the first of the month, etc., Numbers 29:1, and so with all of them. In other words, the verses mentioning dates. And just as the Sabbath day is remembered by our counting from it to the first day from the Sabbath and the second day from the Sabbath, so too, the Exodus from Egypt is remembered by our counting of the first month. If so, then when the month of Nisan is called the first month and Tishri the seventh, the solution is that Nisan is the first month from redemption and Tishri is the seventh. This is for the reason, for it shall be the first to you, for it is not the first in the year, but it is the first for you. For such is it called as a remembrance of our redemption.
Okay, stop there for just a second. Let's sort of unpack what Nachmanides was saying. Who can sort of summarize?
Well, it's saying that you count the months because of something that happened.
Right. So when what's the first of the year? What do we say? Here's Happy New Year, 5781. When do we start counting that?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah, right? And that is the first day of the month of Tishrei, which is the seventh month, right? So he's saying, well, wait a minute, what's that all about? If that's the beginning of the year, that's what we count. That's 5781. At Saturday night, we're not going to start saying, well, that's 5782. We're going to wait for another 7 months for that, right? So he said, there's a different counting that's going on here, and that's the significance of lechem, for you. So Rosh Hashanah is the first of the year for whom?
Everyone?
Everyone.
Everyone, yes.
Right. That's the creation of the world. That's what we're counting, right? This is the birthday of the world. But that's not just for you. That's not what it's about for you, right? What we want you to understand is you shall count from the time in which you were born. And when were you born?
The redemption from Egypt.
Right.
So it makes it more particular.
Right. Right. Which is Rashi's whole thing, saying why is it making a big deal about the difference between the creation story at the beginning of the Torah and now the particular story that we have starting in chapter 12. Now, of course, the first 12 chapters of Exodus talk about our slavery and the plagues and all the rest. But it really starts, we as our national story, once we have redemption, once we are free, once we can come to Sinai, once we have a Torah, Dayenu, right? Once we have these things, now it's our story. Before that, it was just a universal story of the creation. But now this is the beginning for you, counted forever. Yes, sir. Alan, please.
Now, what is the plural, the second person plural for you, is that lecha?
Well, no, lecha, cha, or the is the first person, I mean, second person singular. Lechem
Lechem.
is is the plural.
Okay, so if it's lechem, if what we're talking about is lechem, wouldn't that be for everyone? All of you?
For the Israelites.
Oh, okay.
This is right. That was Nachmanides' teaching. He said for the rest of the world, they're counting and he's going to get into this in a second. We're gonna go back to Ramban's piece.
Okay,
He starts to teach that because he'll say, well, wait a minute. In the Torah, it refers to 3 names for the first of the months, right? The first month is as we have it in this week's Torah portion, Rosh Chodeshim. It's the beginning of the months, right? So it's number 1. The other is Shabbat Aviv. It's the month of Aviv, right? The month of spring, which is also another way of referring to Nisan. And then finally Nisan. But when did we get Nisan? Well, we're gonna hear what Nachmanides has to say in just a second. Arnie.
Just a question. If I went back to that time where they were using lunar calendar, is our Rosh Hashanah, would it coincide with every other Rosh Hashanah in the world? Meaning, like, if you were a Canaanite, did you have a Rosh Hashanah? Because they were all using lunar calendars.
Yeah, no. For the Canaanites, they were also, of course, a part of that Persian Babylonian sphere of influence. But there are other cultures that have other ways of counting New Year's, which the Torah was not concerning itself with. But the world of the Persians was very much so, and he's going to make a very interesting assertion here, which I'd like to get to. I think it addresses your question, and it was a very good question at that. So let's see what he has to say. Was that Jerry reading?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you finish this up? Where it says, and our sages.
And our sages have already mentioned this topic and said that the names of the month came with us from Babylonia, Jerusalem, Talmud, Rosh Hashanah. For the start, we had no names. The reason for this is that at the start, the order of the months was as a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. But when we left Babylonia and the verse was fulfilled, Jeremiah 16, 14, 15, that it shall be no more be said, as the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But as the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north. We return to calling the months by names by which they were called in Babylonia, as a reminder that there we stood, and from there the Lord drew us out. For the names Nisan, Iyar, and the others are Persian names and are only found in the books of the Babylonian prophets. Zechariah 1:7, Ezra 6:15,
Nehemiah.
and Nehemiah 1:1. And in the Megillot Esther 3:7, therefore, the verse says, in the first month, which is the month Nisan, similar to, they cast pur, that is the lot, Ibid. And until today, the nations in the lands of Persia and the Media call the months Nisan and Tishrei, and all the rest like us. And these names recall through the months the second redemption, just as we did until now for the first one.
Right. So what's Nachmanides claiming? We count the first of the months Lechem because what happened 2 weeks after the beginning of Nisan? Passover, our redemption, right? That's your freedom. So we are already in that preparatory period once we have Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and that was your redemptive story, and that was the story for us for 1,000 years until we had the exile to Babylonia. And the Babylonians were then conquered first by the Medians and then by the Persians. And that Near Eastern culture, the Babylonian Persian culture, then was where we were in exile for our second time. Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians destroyed the temple in the year 586 before the Common Era. We were in exile for some 2+ generations, some 70 years in Babylonia. The Persians then allowed us to creep back in fits and starts to reestablish a second temple. And that was wonderful. And yet there still remained most of the Jews back in Babylonia, back in Persia, up until the modern era. That was the center of Jewish culture, was Babylonia and Persia. The Talmud that we read is what?
The Babylonian.
It's the
Babel.
Babylonian Talmud, right? So the Jerusalem Talmud, or what we call the Yerushalmi, that is of secondary importance to the Babylonian or the Bavli. And all of the Gaonim, all the great scholars were Babylonian scholars up until the modern era. Modern era, I'm just squeeze the time a little bit. Really, until the Middle Ages did the weight of influence shift from Babylonia to Europe, right? And Maimonides was a big part of that, and the ascendancy of the great academies in France and in Germany, etc. They made it so that it was no longer necessary for people to send she'elot, or questions, all the way to Babylon and then have them come all the way back. Rather, we already had poskim, we already had great scholars who could answer and address the questions for the Jews who now were in Central Europe, eventually Eastern Europe, etc. But that took a long time. And so for all of those who returned and built that Second Temple period, and that was about the year 520, although the books of Ezra and Nehemiah usually are credited to be anywhere from the year 480 or less, 430 even. They counted the redemption not so much from Egypt, although we still would make reference to Yetziat Mitzrayim, our time of the redemption and exodus from Egypt, but the redemption from Babylon. Which is why we started to use the names like Tishrei and Nisan, because we wanted to remember that we've been exiled a couple of times, and so we counted them. So here's a question: what's the redemptive time that we would count perhaps in our modern era?
Perhaps the creation of the state of Israel.
Yeah, creation of Israel.
Right. I think that's why when we refer to Yom HaAtzmaut, and people think, it's another nation. No, it's not another nation. It's a huge, big deal that, God Almighty, people thought it would never happen, and that Jews would always be the wandering Jew. People would even have a plant, that awful plant. I suppose I like it because you can clip it and it grows everywhere, right? And they say, oh, it's like the wandering Jew. I mean, you look around, oh, there it is. And so it's a big deal to say, no, there is an independent Medinat Yisrael. Whoa, right? And I think it's too close for us right now. We're still only 72 years, 73 it'll be in May, of the independence of Israel. I think because there's so many of us who've been here from the beginning with Israel, that we don't fully comprehend how astounding it is that there is an independent Israel. So I think that, I hope that's the case, Alan, that the generations to come will mark that day, 1948, as the great redemptive period and another counting time. I hope that's the case as opposed to Yom HaShoah, because yes, we count Tisha B'Av as the days of the destruction, and you mark it and you fast on it, but you can't inform your whole life just by the destruction. Arnie, please.
Okay, I asked the wrong question. When did Rosh Hashanah become Rosh Hashanah?
Well,
I
it's
mean,
in the
some are
Torah.
gonna say,
It's
what?
in the Torah, but it doesn't. If you look in the Torah, and you should do so.
Okay.
In the Torah, Rosh Hashanah is about this much. There's not much, and they don't even call it Rosh Hashanah. They call it Yom Teruah. It's the day of the sounding, right? It's not a big deal. And Yom Kippur is just a little bit more, right? It's not a big deal. Of the major festivals, Sukkot, Chag, the festival, was towered over the significance of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? It was the days in which we celebrated the Chanuchat Habayit, the dedication of the first temple and the second temple. I mean, that's the reason why we have Hanukkah for 8 days. All of that, Sukkot was hugely important. And of course, Passover. We mention Passover, the Exodus, every time we say Kiddush. We mention the Passover in every prayer service. We don't mention Rosh Hashanah. We don't mention Yom Kippur at every prayer service or at every time we say Kiddush. So it's those were greatly significant. Why Rosh Hashanah became such a big deal? That's a good question. I think that you could make a great argument that maybe we were wrong-headed about that. There's no reason why we should have made as big a deal over Rosh Hashanah as we should over both Passover and Sukkot. But
Counting from that point, who chose that point? In other words, like you said, we chose seventh month, or test. The 7th month is redemption, etc. But we had to plant the stake for that first month.
right. Okay. So when do you start? When do you celebrate New Year's? When do your family? So when do you celebrate New Year's?
Calendar says it's New Year's Eve.
No. I'm talking about you.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, it was built around. I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean,
Right.
who planted that first stake?
We're in the Western civilization. When do Western civilized Jews in the Western civilization, when do we celebrate New Year?
January 1.
January 1st, right? And why? I mean, there's nothing about that for us. There's no significance to us, except for we live in a world where January 1st is the big deal, right? And the Jews who came back from Persia, Babylon, they noticed that the rest of the world was making a big deal about the first day of Tishrei. And so, we joined in.
But it's the shifting of the light as well. Or shifting of the light. We're getting the light back that we thought was going to disappear. It's really, it's maybe ancient, but it's still sort of barbaric.
The
worship of the light of the sun coming back.
Oh, you mean for around January 1st, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. There's to that. You're right. Because it's around the winter solstice. Absolutely. The Romans had their own celebration, Janus, the two-faced celebration of one looking back and one looking forward. And so if the rest of the world is choosing January 1st as a big deal. Hey, by the way, why did the Christians choose December 25th as the birth for Jesus?
Same reason, the light was coming back.
No, because it's the beginning of a new year. The beginning of a new year, right? And so when is a Jewish boy considered to be viable and a part of the covenant?
8 days.
On the 8th day. Count 8 days before January 1st.
Mhm.
That's Thanksgiving.
That's December 25. So when you go to the Vatican, and you should go, When you go to the Vatican, as you go down the main hallway with the tapestries, you'll see an enormous tapestry on the celebration of Jesus's circumcision.
Rabbi,
What day was he circumcised?
December 25th.
January 1st.
January 1st.
January 1st. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
but also, Rabbi,
so here it is anthropologically. It wasn't just Jews, it's Christians and everyone else. If the whole world is celebrating New Year's on January the 1st, you can either fight it or you just do it. And the Christians were very smart. They said, okay, we'll take this pagan day of the New Year and we'll work it into our own deal. Jews sort of did the same thing with Rosh Hashanah. The whole world is doing Tishrei the 1st. We're saying the first day is Nisan, but no one else digs it because it's our story. You know, the first of the month is Nisan the 1st, and then it's just us. So if the rest of the world is celebrating the New Year's, we're going to do the same thing the 1st of Tishrei. I'm sorry, Kathy.
yeah, Rabbi, Hanukkah starts on the 25th of that month.
Kislev.
Kislev. So I always thought there was a relationship between that and December 25th, that when they were all out trying to convert everybody, it was a winter holiday on the 25th. I don't know.
No, it's interesting. In America, we promoted Hanukkah to compete with Christmas. I mean, you're 100% correct. But it's not so much the 25th of Kislev to the 25th of December. It was marketing, and it was like their kids got a lot of presents and our kids got latkes. So we said we should make sure our kids are spoiled too, and we succeeded.
Latkes is still better than toys.
I'm with you. I find that fascinating, don't you? I mean, as we came back from Babylon, we added to our story, and we began today's session by saying, how can we add to our Haggadah some new story? And Linda, you brought it up, and Margie as well, that we have other elements to bring in something new. Well, that's not in contradiction to the spirit of Judaism. That's perfectly in consonance with the Jewish experience, i.e., these new experiences that we have that are particular and personal and important should be woven into our Jewish experiences, and certainly should be mentioned as a part of our Passover Seder, because that's what we've been doing ever since. By the way, in the Passover Haggadah that you have, the traditional one, the old Maxwell's, right? Most of the stories don't deal with the actual Exodus story. What do they deal with?
I don't have one.
I haven't used it for years.
Midrash? Is it?
No, the Midrashim that deal with our struggle against Romans. You know, and what were they doing in Bnei Brak, planning until the very, very end, right? So, you know, in the Haggadah that Susan and I put together, we wanted to re-emphasize the biblical story, because we think that's been lost in the shuffle. And also, our struggle against the Romans 2,000 years ago doesn't resonate as much as it did when it was still being put together, again, a couple of thousand years ago. Anyway, so let's get to our text. We have yet really to read more than 2 verses of this week's Torah portion. So we're going to get there. So hold on. This is the Tractate of Freeman says, in Nisan, because it's such an important month, one should not fast in Nisan. And yet, Dafka, there's a passage that says the righteous, the tzaddikim, should fast on Rosh Chodesh. What do you do? Okay, so we're going to skip over this section right here because this repeats pretty much what we've been reading for the last several parshiot. And that here's the final instruction. After Bezalel had made all of the covers and the altars and the garments and everything was constructed, finally Moses is told, okay, bring in the Ark of the Covenant and put the curtains up here and put the table there and put the altar here, put the menorah over there. And I don't know if I want to get to that. Okay, I want to get to this part right here. 17th verse, where it says, again it repeats, in this first month of the second year, on the first of the month, the tabernacle was set up. So another reason to celebrate the Nisan. One was the redemption from Egypt. And what's the second thing that happened on the first of Nisan, 1 year later? What we set up the
tabernacle?
The tabernacle, right. So there's two reasons why Nisan was so important. One was the redemption. The second was the ultimate part of the redemption wasn't just that we were free, but a year later, we not only were free, but we had our Mishkan, we had our place of worship. And then, of course, we were able to celebrate Torah. So I don't know, Margie, would you read this from Rav Chavivi?
Sure. Rav Chavivi from Kozena'ah said to Rav Ashi, come and hear a different proof from the following verse. And it came to pass in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was erected. It was taught. That day took 10 crowns. It was the first day of creation, meaning Sunday, the first day of the offerings brought by the princes, the first day of the priesthood, the first day of service in the temple, the first time the descendant of fire onto the altar, the first time that consecrated foods were eaten, the first day of the resting of the divine presence upon the Jewish people, the first day of the Jewish people, the first day that the Jewish people were blessed by the priest, and the first day of the prohibition to bring offerings on improvised altars. Once the tabernacle was erected, it was prohibited to offer sacrifices elsewhere. And it was the first of the months. And from the fact that the new moon of Nisan of that year was on the first day of the week in the previous year, it was on the fourth day of the week.
Right. So what the Talmud is trying to say, again, this day, 1 year later, we are having our second celebration of the beginning of Nisan. In the beginning, this is the first of the months for you, and people get ready because in 2 weeks we're getting out, right? Prepare yourself. We're about to have the Exodus. The Exodus doesn't happen for 2 more weeks, but already on the very beginning of Nisan, a year ago, we were getting ready. And now 1 year later, here we are at Mount Sinai, and we're again told it's the first of the months for you. Last year was for redemption. This year it is for the establishment of our tabernacle. And it just so happened because it was on a Sunday that it reflected all these other firsts. And we just went through it, what the Talmud said. So again, we would normally, if you read through this passage, you might think, again, with the poles and the curtain and the altar and the menorah, and your eyes glaze over and you pass by it. And instead, there's these magnificent little sentences that are packed with so much significance to the story of our people, the evolution of our people, not just redeemed from slavery, but also now with the establishment of an altar, a tabernacle, a place of worship, and then soon our first Passover celebration in freedom in 2 more weeks. It's amazing stuff. Anyone on this? We'll actually get to or a few more verses of this week's Torah portion? Again, stunned into silence. All right. I love this stuff. I can't help it. I think it's really cool. So forgive me. So anyway, Moses continues to set up the tabernacle, placing the sockets. And here's the juicy part. And this is what I'm going to be reading on Shabbat finally. So who would like to read this? We have from 28 down to 30, 30, whatever. Who'd like to read this? Go ahead.
Then he put up the screen for entrance to the tabernacle. At the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, he placed the altar of burnt offering. On it, he offered up the burnt offering and the meal offering as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the laver between the tent and of meeting and the altar, and put the water in for washing. From it, Moses and Aaron had his sons would wash their hands and feet. They washed when they entered the tent of meeting and when they approached the altar, as Adonai had commanded Moses.
And go ahead and I'll just read this. On the 8th day of the consecration, all of them mentioned here, including Moses, were alike in respect of the priestly office. The translation of Rachatzu in the Targum should therefore be umakdashin, i.e. they were made holy through this act of washing. And we talked about that last week, the ritual washing of the hands before we have our challah, before we eat our meal, because that's a part of each of us acting in a role of a priest. And then, Alan, go ahead and read this verse 30.
And he set up the enclosure around the tabernacle and the altar, and put up the screen of the gate of the enclosure. When Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of the Adonai filled the tabernacle.
Okay, and then finally, these are the last couple of verses.
Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of Adonai filled the tabernacle.
We're going to talk about that in a second. We have a couple of passages, obviously, I wanted to get to. Let's look at the last three verses of the book of Exodus. Then,
when the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, cloud of Adonai rested by day, and the fire would appear in it by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. Amen.
Right, and that's the last line of the book of Exodus. Can I get someone else to read this last piece by Or HaChaim about Moses not being able to come in?
I can.
Please, Kathy, thank you.
And Moses was unable to enter the tent of testimony. It seems strange that the cloud prevented Moses from entering the tent, seeing that the Torah had told us in Exodus that Moses went inside the cloud, and so forth. The difference is clear. In Parashat Mishpatim, Moses entered the cloud after God had summoned him. In this instance, no summons from God had been forthcoming. Another reason why Moses could not enter the tent may have been indicated by the words that the cloud was stationary above the tent, and the glory of God filled the entire tent. In Mishpatim, we were told that God's appearance on the top of the mountain was like that of fire, which consumes. And immediately afterwards, we were told that Moses entered the cloud prior to ascending the mountain. This means that the place Moses ascended was not the place where God's glory reposed at the time. In our situation, Moses could not enter an area in which God's glory reposed.
Right. So they're wrestling with an idea. I don't know if that even they're happy with that answer, right? That here's this tent of meeting, and finally it's filled with this glory of God, so much so that even Moses isn't able to come into it. And we're struck with that, because wasn't Moses speaking with God as if panim al panim, as if face to face? Why would you think, again, this is all midrashic, why would you think that there are times that even Moses could not enter the tent of meeting? There's no wrong answer here, because no one knows.
Well, according to what we just read, he had to be summoned the first time, and he can't do it unless he is summoned. God tells him to come.
Well, the revelation that we would have would mostly come from the tent of meeting. How would Moses get it? Would he get like a postcard? A little text? Moshe, come in.
They have a dream.
He had a dream. Good. Go ahead, Barbara.
Just wondering whether it was to give the other people, the common folk, an opportunity to connect with God. And that Moses was so connected to God.
I love it.
Give other people an opportunity. I don't know.
Well, I mean, but if Moses can't go in, no one else is going in either, right?
Exactly. And no one else is going to have an opportunity to speak or whatever, because it's going to be Moses's show.
What does it say? Again, just throwing out, what does it say about Moses in his teaching, that there are times in which even he's not privy to connect with God?
Well, when he entered the promised land.
Well, he didn't enter the promised land.
That's right. He did.
Right. So if someone speaks for God, right, they almost have that divine power. But here it's very much limiting it. Moses, you can't always speak for me. You're not always going to be in here. There's so much well beyond you, and there's something to that as well. So even without Moses doing so, what helped lead the children of Israel?
The pillars of smoke and the fire.
Right. And that's, to your point, Barbara, that was evident for everybody. Right? You didn't need Moses to come in and say, okay, everybody, we're, wagons ho, right? Everybody saw that pillar going or saw it stop. And so there is a more universal connection to it. It's still a troubling piece of theology that we built this Mishkan, this dwelling place. And what does it mean that God's glory filled there, that it all stuffed in? There are many midrashim which utilize that metaphor that we had, that we've gone over a couple of times, of a cave along the seashore, that the waters of the ocean or the Mediterranean or whatever can fill into that cave and fill that cave so that no person can go into it. I'm thinking especially, who's been to Rosh Hashanah with me? A couple of, Yoni, you've been to Rosh Hashanah, right? So if you go in there and the water, and on a stormy day, it's frightening, right? It really starts to fill in. So the cave can be filled in with water. We can't go in there. They keep us out. But is in any way the Mediterranean lessened by it filling this cave? No. The Mediterranean is full as ever, and it still filled this cave, which previously would be empty, and which is, again, a wonderful metaphor for God's presence, that God can fill all the universe, can also enter into our lives without being diminished. And also, by the way, the same metaphor of the ocean or the sea, is used for the Talmud itself. It's a Yalma Talmud, that the Talmud is like a sea, that no matter where you jump in, it has no beginning or end. I'm sorry, Alan, please.
Yes, I was thinking, in today's terminology, Moses is like an assistant, minister assistant to the boss. And she gets a lot of respect, or he. That's a powerful position.
I missed that. I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Yes, like today, we're a secretary administrative assistant to the big boss. She has a lot of power because of her position. And then Moses was in the same position, wasn't he?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I get the analogy. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So anyway, that concludes the book of Exodus. And next, of course, we have, what do you got there for us, Kathy?
It's a Haggadah by Yaakov Kirsch, and he does the dry bones. If you see, this is on one of the pages. Kind of reminded me of Mike and you.
It's like a Mr. Natural cartoon.
Almost. This is dry bones.
Dry bones. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, the political cartoons you see on Jewish news.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
He's terrific. Anyway, so it's on this Saturday night, we'll have Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then 2 weeks after, our Passover Seder. And I hope that this Shabbat, now we don't know what's going to happen this Shabbat. And I was just with Rabbi Jordy and Dan, and the idea is that 3 of us will be doing services together Friday night and Shabbat morning. And then someone said, no, there's going to be like 3 feet of snow.
Yes.
Who knows? Right? Who knows? So I'm hoping that that I am in the temple, and that I'll read, of course, from the end of the section that we just read, the end of chapter 40 of Exodus, and we'll lift it up. And when we lift it up, what will we say?
Next year in Jerusalem.
No, but Alan had it, but Alan just cut out. What is it, Alan?
Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek.
Exactly. Be strong, be of good courage. And then we'll roll it back up, and we'll open up a second Torah that's rolled to the 12th chapter of Exodus, and read this special section.
And there's one thing we could say: wear your mask. We're certain of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you for joining me on this special Rosh Chodesh session.
Thank you.
Yoni and everybody.
Thank
I
you.
want to get to see you on Thursday. And if you, I hope all of you are getting your shots. I think a good number of you are. Good. All right.
Yeah,
Yoni, thank you
finally.
again, buddy. I'll see you in a couple of hours.
Thanks,
you.
Rabbi. Thanks, Yoni.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi, thank you.
My pleasure.
Stay safe, everyone.